Good day, Anatomistas. This is Dissecting Session Part 2, together with me, Jessica.
With me, Katrina.
With me, Faith Olarte.
With me, Ira, from Group 912 AJ12. For this session, we will be dissecting a pig's kidney and locate its major structures as well as to trace the path of blood and urine.
So what does our kidney do? Their main job is to cleanse the blood of toxins, waste products, and excess fluids to transform them into urine.
Let us examine the external anatomy of a pig's kidney. This pig kidney is roughly 5 inches long, 2.5 inches wide, and a ½ inch thick. It is roughly the size of a large fist. Kidneys are bean-shaped organs that come in pairs.
A kidney is a reddish-brown bean-shaped organ with both convex and concave borders. For the superficial parts, the kidney is composed of 3 protective layers, namely the superficial and collagenous renal fascia, which in this case is not present. Its function is to anchor the kidney and adrenal gland. Then we have the perirenal fat or adipose capsule that cushions the kidney against blows. And lastly, the deep renal capsule, which has a smooth and glistening appearance, and this layer encloses the kidney and is mostly composed of collagen and elastin, hence it can also be called the fibrous capsule.
Let us locate the renal artery, which is found near the renal vein. The renal artery is where blood enters the kidney. Now, let us locate the renal vein. This vein is where blood exits the kidney. You can differentiate them by its wall thickness. The renal artery has a thicker wall than the renal vein.
In this frontal section of the kidney, there are 3 main regions that can be seen. First, we have the renal cortex, which is this outer region of the kidney. It is a space for blood vessels that connect to the nephrons, which are the functional and structural units of the kidney that begin in the cortex and mostly located deep within the renal medulla.
The nephron is composed of the renal corpuscle, which is responsible for the filtration of the plasma. This is where the glomerulus and the Bowman's capsule located. This darker region is the renal medulla. It's the innermost part of the kidney, and its main function is to regulate the concentration of the urine.
We can also notice the pyramid-like tissues in the renal medulla. This is called the renal pyramids. These pyramids are made up of collecting ducts that transport urine from the kidney tubules of the nephrons in the renal cortex to the cup-shaped cavities or calyxes, where it is collected before passing through the ureter and bladder.
The renal columns contain middle-sized arteries and veins, which carry blood between the nephrons and the renal artery and vein.
This is the renal pelvis. It is a flat funnel-shaped tube that is continuous with the ureter leaving the hilum. The extensions of the pelvis, this right here, is called the calyces. It forms cup-shaped drains that collect urine, which continuously drains from the tips of the pyramids and into the pelvis, then urine passes out through the ureter to the bladder. That is the ureter.
Unfiltered blood enters the kidney through the renal arteries found in the hilum region. It then branches off into the segmental arteries, and then it will run along the spaces between the renal pyramids known as the renal columns. These blood vessels are known as the interlobar arteries. After which, it will split off into the top or the base of the renal pyramids known as the arcuate arteries. Then, it will further branch off into the renal cortex as interlobular arteries or cortical radiate arteries. These blood vessels serve multiple nephrons where filtration of the blood occurs, specifically in the glomerulus. Blood is supplied to the glomerulus via the afferent arterioles. Once the wastes are filtered,
Blood exits through the efferent arterioles.
it then diverges into the peritubular capillaries, which supplies blood to the proximal and distal convoluted tubules and the collecting duct, and into the vasa recta, which supplies blood to the loop of Henle. It will converge again in the cortical radiate veins or the interlobular veins. Then, it will pass through the arcuate veins at the base of the pyramids. This leads the blood back to the renal columns in the interlobar veins, which then goes to the renal veins in the hilum region, before sending the now filtered blood to the inferior vena cava of the heart.
For the formation of urine, we identify three processes. First, we have the glomerular filtration, which happens in the renal cortex. The origin of filtrate comes from water and smaller solutes forced through the capillary walls of the blood vessels and glomerular capsule forced to the renal tubule. Then second, during tubular reabsorption, which happens the moment when the filtrate from the Bowman's capsule enters the proximal convoluted tubule. This happens again in the renal cortex. Useful substances in the filtrate are transported out into the tubule cells and then returned to the bloodstream through the adjacent capillaries. Majority of water reabsorption happens in the proximal convoluted tubule of the cortex. Lastly, during tubular secretion, hydrogen and potassium ions, creatinine and drugs are further removed from peritubular blood and secreted by the tubule cells into the filtrate. These secreted ions plus the filtrate form the urine. The urine then flows out of the nephron tubule into the collecting duct, then passing through the renal pelvis into the ureter, and then down the urinary bladder. So that concludes the pathway of the filtrate that becomes a urine.